One. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us here on The Father Show. And I'm your host, Mike Thompson. Today, we have another great show for you, and we are going to get to that here shortly. But before we do, if you have not subscribed to The Father Show with Mike Thompson on our YouTube channel, I ask that you would go to our YouTube channel, hit that subscription button, and while you're there, don't forget, hit the like button. And that way you will be notified of the shows that we're going to have coming up and the shows that we do. Excuse me. And also, for those men that are looking for resources, things that can help you in your day-to-day life and things that you may need, whether if it's an attorney, if it's a nanny, if it's child care, if it's financing, or you just need a coach, someone to help you navigate through the life that you are going through. I ask that you would go to the Father Show with MikeThompson.com, click on resources, and there you will find national and statewide resources there that can assist you. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into this show because we have a fantastic show and we have a lot to cover. So, today we have Mr. Alan Carter. And now, Alan, for years, has been writing a monthly letter to his children during their teenage years. The letters cover an amazing array of life lessons that are also show an intimate glimpse of one's family life journey. All families, the same challenges. Well, excuse me. Let me say that. All families face the same challenge, and it is this connection that makes the book enduring and relevant to all who reads it. Christian faith and values are highlighted throughout the book, and the stories from the Bible are brought to life. And Alan, if you can't tell from that introduction, does believe in Christ, and he has passed that on to his kids. And I'm so thankful that we have the opportunity to learn what letters from a father can do for our kids and how it has benefited him and his family. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I want to welcome Alan Carter to the show. Alan, how you doing, sir?
Mike, it's great to be with you. And I want to say before we start that I'm so grateful for your ministry and what you're doing to help fathers be the best they can be for their children. So thank you, my friend.
And thank you, because you're doing the same thing. And that's one reason that we've come together is that we both desire for men to be the best versions of themselves. And we both desire to be the best fathers that we can be. And I know for myself that I wish I knew some of the things I've been learning from you, from other guests on the show when I was raising my kids. And that's why I'm so pleased to have you on the show so that you can also share your experience of raising your kids. And what you did by writing letters to them is something that is definitely different. It wasn't something that you hear about. And I'm amazed at it. I like the idea, but how did you come to the idea of writing these letters to your kids?
Well, Mike, thanks again. And before I answer that question, I'll say that none of us are perfect as dads, and our kids
Right.
recognize that. And I think what's more important than that perfection is the effort, right? I think our
Hmm.
kids recognize when we're really trying to be the best we can be and really striving to learn with them, they recognize that, and that's just a huge part of the fatherhood journey. So none of us are perfect except for Jesus, but that relentless effort is important. And
And
yeah,
that,
this book is. I'm sorry. Go ahead,
no,
please.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to share you. Your question was how I got started, and it's one of these things that as we go through life as dads, especially with younger kids, there's so many things that happen in the course of a day or a week, and
Hmm.
sometimes we just blow right by them, Mike. We're all so busy. And so if something happens, we may not even remark upon it. But all of a sudden, if you get to the end of the day and you look back, you can recognize that there may have been a learning moment in something that happened with your family.
Hmm.
And for me, the opportunities for these letters arose just by reflecting back and wanting to pull on that experience and explain it further to the kids and maybe look into a piece of value or wisdom that I might could work on with them. So that's how it started. And it became something that went on for years and years and years. And it's been a great part of our family.
And you're absolutely right. And I'm really glad that you said this, that there's no such thing as a perfect parent. There's only
No
one
way.
person that's perfect that walked this earth. And so we can't. However, we can strive to be the best that we can be. And as men and as fathers, I think we should always be striving to learn to be better and to be the best version of ourselves. I think that's so important.
Well, that's true. I think look, God would love he's given us all such unique gifts and talents and they're very different from one another.
Hmm.
But I think he would want us to maximize our opportunity with those gifts, right? And
Hmm.
one of
Hmm.
those, if we're blessed to be fathers, I think he would love us to be the best that we can be.
Hmm. And how old were your kids when you first started writing for them? I know you said teenagers. So, by what ages were they?
We started about 13 years old. Now, my kids are older now, Mike. My youngest actually just turned 20 last
Okay.
week. And we're
Ah.
talking here in the late part of November. And so she just sort of left that window of time. But my eldest two, one is 28 and one is 26. So
Hmm.
that'll give you a sense for how long that I've been doing this. It's been quite some time.
Yeah.
But I always felt that the teenage years were a time in a child's life where they were faced with so much pressures and challenges and growth and all sorts of academic requirements and the pressures they faced from their peers. And I also felt that they were the most formidable in
Hmm.
terms of being able to impart wisdom to them. They're seeking a lot at that time. So I just felt that that was the right time for me to write to them. And also, so much was happening in their lives at the time, right? That it gave me plenty of things to write about. And you know that's
Yeah.
true if you're a father of a teenager out
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
there.
And that is a formative year. And they are trying to learn how to get into the adulthood, being a little bit more independent and to be able to, you know, kind of move away from their parents to some degree, you know. That's the time I think when we have the hardest time to really stay connected with our kids. And I think that's a really a formative time that we should stay connected.
You're so right, Mike. There's that natural lean towards independence at that age that they want to experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our view in their eyes changes dramatically in their teenage years, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Another father told me, he said, it's funny, he says, you can chart the relative intelligence of the parents in their children's eyes. And I'll just spell it out for you. When the kids are really young, they look to their father as a hero. You can never do any wrong. You're the smartest man on earth. And as they get older into their teenage years, suddenly you become the most unintelligent human being possible, and they can't imagine you could possibly even tie your shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that time when they're leaning into the independence that you mentioned, and they're looking to connect outside of the family. And
Mm-hmm.
another good time for me to be writing these letters to them to keep them connected.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you give the letters to them after you write it?
Well, it's funny. I get this question a lot, Mike. So my habit was after I'd write a letter, I would email it to them. And
Okay.
since these are teenagers, you can imagine sometimes what I'd get back after I spent a lot of time and thought and prayer over a letter, and I'd email it to them, and guess what sometimes I would hear?
Well.
Nothing. But that's okay, Mike. I'm here to tell you that back to what I said earlier about the effort we put out.
Mm-hmm.
Years later, sometimes they would come to me and say, "Dad, do you remember we experienced this and you wrote about this? Can we talk about it?" Or
Mm.
they'd say, "I remember that letter. That really meant a lot to me." So I would encourage fathers out there that are listening to your show not to worry about the immediate response, because that's not how a teenager processes things.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, just to focus on the content, the prayer that goes into it, and your own effort.
And I agree with you that the effort is definitely key. If they see you making an effort to teach them something, be a part of their life, inspire them, uh, give them praise, whatever, is really important.
Oh, it's huge. And letters give us such an opportunity, as I mentioned to you previously, to really redo an experience and pull some values from it, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many examples in this book. I remember your hometown, Denver. We were on a family ski trip one time, and that Denver airport, as you very well know, is really something. And we were in a bus going to the rental car center at the time, and it was ski season. We're all excited, and but here we are, jammed on a bus with oceans of gear and people, and it was hot, and we've been traveling all day, and people are irritable, and they just want to get off this packed bus. And there, staring out the window, was this 3-year-old boy, and he was so excited. He had never been on a bus before. He was ecstatic with the experience. He was looking out at the mountains and the sunshine, and here he was. I mean, it was amazing to watch him just be present and enthusiastic. And that was really a lesson for our kids that I wrote about, and for all of us, that we have to have that same joy. We have to come into our day and to each experience, not with the weight of the world on it, or the weight of
Mm-hmm.
our calendars, or the weight of our responsibilities, but just embracing the glory of God that's around us, the
Mm-hmm.
gifts that have been given to us, and the health and presence that we have. And so those types of things, the letters are great for, because you can revisit an experience with you that you share
Right.
with your kids and draw some value from it.
Right. And you have in the book, it's like 70 chapters in this book. And we're going to go through we can't go through all 70, but, and plus, I want people to buy the book and read it. So I don't want you to tell them all 70. But I want to start off with what I think is important. And I wanted you to talk about in your first chapter, it talks about love. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that letter that you wrote about love?
Hmm. Well, Mike, in my view, love is the basis for all things, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
God is the creator of love, and without love, we're nothing. And this whole life of ours is meaningless, in my view. And I think the foundation of all relationships between us and our creator God, between our children, between our spouses and our family, our fellow man, it starts there. Love is selfless, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
and everything that's good about that quality of love is meaningful, especially within a family. And I think if we start our relationships, especially with our family, with that selfless love. Um, Even when things go sideways, they won't go sideways for long. And I think that's a huge part of it. So I wanted to impart that on the front end. And in my very first letter with the kids is to really embrace that concept of love and lead with that and lean into it together as a family.
Hmm. And you're right. There's nothing more important in a family than love. And I don't think there's nothing more important for a father to show to his kids, not just to them, but also to their mother as well. Would you agree?
Oh, that is so well said, Mike. You know, our kids watch us so closely, don't they? They
Hmm.
see everything. And
Yeah,
they just soak everything in, and our words are far less important than our actions are to them.
absolutely.
And how they watch us interact with our spouses and how they watch us show and share our love. I mean, those are critical things. And my son, who's now 26, um, that he learned how to be a man and how to
Hmm.
be a husband now, and how
Hmm.
hopefully someday to be a father,
Hmm.
from watching me from the time he could open his eyes. And thank the good Lord for his mercy, right? Because
Hmm.
none of us are perfect and we all make terrible mistakes.
Hmm.
But owning those mistakes sometimes with our kids, being open and honest with them, and leaning into that love even through imperfection and sometimes temporary dislike and hardship, that carries us all the way through.
Now, what would you tell a father that is not continually active in their child's life? How would you express to him to show that love that that child really needs?
I guess two things, Mike. The first thing I would likely do is to challenge that father by simply saying, um, I think that the value of an engaged and loving father can simply not be overstated in a child's life.
Hmm.
It really can't be. The power that we have by being a father can shape the course of that young man or young woman's life, not just in their lifetime, but also for generations to come. So God has entrusted us as fathers and mothers with this power. And it's something that we can't squander. So I would lovingly challenge any dad who's is struggling with this, right? Because
Hmm.
it's hard. It requires effort, and it requires selflessness, and it requires sacrifice. But I think that conversation is an important one. And again, I'm thankful for you doing that through your show and
Hmm.
supporting dads who are right there in the crosshairs of all these responsibilities. So I would start with the challenge, is how I would frame it. And the second is just to recognize with your kids that effort over perfection, like we've been talking throughout this
Hmm.
conversation. Sit down with your kids and be honest. Say, son, daughter, I'm not perfect, but I love you so much, and I want to be with you. I want to help be part of your life. How can we do this together? I think that openness is really important with kids, especially teenagers.
Yeah, yeah. Because I've seen so many single moms say that once their son reaches that 12, 13, 14 age group, they start, as my mother used to say, they start smelling themselves. And, and that is really a, a, a crucial time that a father needs to be in that child's life. And you need to be there from day one all the way through. But you have got to be able to show him what it's really like to be a man. And because he's looking at it in the way that he's seen it, which might have been no father around, no men around, and not knowing how to give love and to have love. I mean, you can have it from your mom, but you know that's one thing. But they're going to be missing that love from your father, and they got to have it.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And look, there are so many families that rely on just a mom, and my heart goes out to them. And it's amazing, these warrior women who are so strong and
Mm-hmm.
are able to wear the father hat and the mother hat simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's when, you know, God needs to step in, right? Through
Mm-hmm.
that peripheral, intercession through the mother to be that father figure for that child, because I think you're right. It's a real challenge when there is no masculine figure in the house, and
Yeah.
especially if the mom's working and it's trying to do everything at once for the children.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, your second checker is called Science and Faith. Why don't you explain what is that?
Well, it's interesting. We here, especially in America, are so reliant on sciences. Sometimes we try to prove everything out, right? And
Mm-hmm.
faith gets put to the sidelines, doesn't it, Mike?
Mm-hmm.
It really does. And you can't go out and measure God, can you? You can't go out and do
They
anything like
try.
that through
They
science. They will try,
yeah.
but the faith is so important. The belief in the unseen, the absolute adherence to those values, even though it can't be measured,
Mm-hmm.
it can't be weighed. It is more important than anything that can, in my view, especially within a family.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, faith is a critical value for families to have. Not only faith in each other and faith that they're going to get through, but faith in their creator, that he
Yeah.
loves them dearly and is at the center of their relationship.
Now, what would you say to a child that doesn't have much faith?
Mm, I think I would encourage the parents to help get them into some youth programs or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And, we pray this for our own kids. Our youngest is off to college now, but we pray daily that she'd meet Christian friends and a Christian
Mm-hmm.
peer group and have a good church. And, all those things just as prayer warriors, another role we have as fathers, right? Is just to
Mm-hmm.
pray that protection and blessing on our kids,
Mm-hmm.
and having that peer group is so important. You've heard, I'm sure, Mike, that we tend to be very similar to the five people that we hang around with the most.
Mm-hmm.
And if for our kids, if those five peers are believers, are people of love and faith and strength and moral fiber, well, that's a pretty good start for those kids, isn't it?
Yeah. And it really in the Bible it states that, because let me back up a little bit. I know when I first went off to college and I, left the church in a sense, because I didn't look for a church to go to, and where I was going to college, that wasn't going to really happen anyway.
Yeah.
But but for the kids that first go off to college, a lot of times they put their going to church on the back burner. It's about, because like you mentioned, it's about the peers, the people they're running around with, who they come in contact with, and the area that they may be going to school might not be conducive to the church that they are comfortable in, are used to going to, and things of that nature. But, I know, and I know as the Bible states, that teach your child the way they should go, and they won't stray too far. And if they do, they'll come back. But do you see, or I don't know, do you think any of your children will kind of put God on the back burner in a sense, and learning what the world is all about and being on their own for the first time.
Oh, heck yeah, Mike. And that's okay. I mean, I think, look, all of us are flawed, right?
Yeah.
And you look at the great heroes of the Bible. I love reading the Psalms of King David. I
Mm-hmm.
just think that's some of the most beautiful literature in the Bible. But here is this hero of God, the slayer of Goliath, in the lineage of Christ. And he had his best friend killed so that he could take his wife. So,
Mm-hmm.
talking about straying, I mean, all of us, even the heroes of faith, stray. And I think it's natural. And thank God again for his mercy and kindness. He expects that of us. And I think as parents, we can't panic when that happens. We just
Mm-hmm.
have to pray
Mm-hmm.
over it and just let it flow and just be consistent in our love and our message. And they'll come around. They
Yeah.
absolutely will, especially if we're just consistent and we're prayer warriors, like I like to say. And that's
Yeah.
okay. So we can't overthink it or stress too much about it, Mike.
Yeah. I agree. I experienced it,
Oh,
and
yeah.
yeah, and
That's
it's
part of the ball game as a dad and a mom, isn't it?
yeah, and you got to be able to let go and let their experience, what they will come against, because that's going to make them stronger, as
Oh, yeah.
and so we've got to have once again faith that God is still watching over them.
No, that is exactly right. You very, very well said.
Now, in your book, also in chapter 11, it talk about complaining.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know I dealt with this with my son on one occasion, but I want to hear why you wrote about complaining.
Hmm. So yeah, just to back up, so the publisher, which was Covenant Books, they're wonderful people, by the way. What they did was curate about 70 letters from the compilation, and then they took 70 different letters and made a separate chapter on each letter. So that's why there's so many chapters. I don't want to scare your readers off or your listeners off. It's not a long book, but it's just about a compilation of those 70 letters. And the complaining one is interesting to me. I believe that we get what we seek, and that a positive person tends to experience a positive life, and a negative person tends to experience a negative one.
Mm.
And complaining to me is one of those things that can let us kind of walk into that negative chat, that negative arena, and that's not a good place to be. It just isn't. When we let circumstances, Mike, dictate our day, or circumstances dictate our worldview, I think we're walking into an area that's tough to recover from.
Hmm.
Look, things happen to all of us, and Jesus talks about it, that the rain will fall on the just, and just as it will on the evil. But how we respond to that dictates our life. And if we respond positively, recognizing that we all go through hard times, or if we just lean into God and our relationship to get us through those things rather than complaining or falling into this negative habits, I think we're going to be much better people and much happier as a result.
Absolutely. I have one saying that I always tell people, because people say, "Oh, man, are you having a bad day?" I said, "No, I had a bad moment in my day, but I don't have a bad day."
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. That's a great way to look at it. And look, we all have terrible things sometimes that happen to us that we have to undergo.
Mm-hmm.
But how we respond to those bad moments, in
Mm-hmm.
your example, and how we move from off from them, how we learn from them, how we view them, man, that's going to be hugely impactful to how our life goes, frankly.
Yeah. Now, Alan, you taught your kids about taking risks. What did you tell them about taking risks?
I've struggled with this one my whole life. I tend to be, Mike, a very methodical, careful, weighted decision-making person. And I think that, frankly, hasn't served me the way I thought it might,
Hmm.
Mike. So whenever I see growth, tremendous growth in a person's life or even in an organization, you always can point to times where they took calculated risk, right? They
Mm-hmm.
put it all on the line. They showed tremendous courage in a moment. They weren't careful. Now, they might have been thoughtful, but they risked something for growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true with our kids. If we teach kids to play it safe, I think we're undercutting their potential. You know, in our society now, and you've heard it talked about endlessly, instead of rewarding winners, we're just giving ribbons for participation.
Yeah.
And I think it hurts us in a certain way. And while it's nice to reward effort and it's nice to reward showing up, I think we've got to teach our children to take some risks, to lean into what they want, to go after things that they're interested in, to lean into adversity, to recognize that, growth only comes through hardship. You
Mm-hmm.
know that analogy of how a diamond is formed, right? It's thousands of years of being under pressure and rock. And, that's a really apt analogy for our kids. If we're going to ask them to grow and strive, we've got to get them used to taking risks, to being uncomfortable, to dusting themselves off after they fall down repeatedly, rather than trying to protect them or give them just a security blanket. So that's probably a little bit more, Mike, than you wanted to know, but you can see
No,
this is something that I think a lot about.
because you're very correct, and that's an important statement that you've been making, because our kids need to know that they can take risks. They can't go through life playing it safe all the time. Now, we don't want them to jump off a cliff and say, you know, I'm okay. I'm gonna be all right. But we do want them to challenge themselves and figure out what it is that they want, what it is that they can do. And one of the things that I tell my kids is when they go through a challenge and they come out on the other side, I say, now see, now you know how strong you are. You didn't think you can do it.
Well said.
So
Well said.
we got to have the challenge. And that goes for the adults as well. When we go through our challenge, we learn just how strong we are and how much we can endure.
I think that's right. And, the other side of even when your kids in your analogy don't make it, there's so much to be learned from failure, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's so much to be learned from helping your kids pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and go at it again.
Yeah.
That's where character is built, is in those furnaces. It really is. I love the story in Daniel with, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You remember that they were
Mm-hmm.
such men of faith, and they refused to change the way they worshiped their God. So the king threw them. He bound them up in that furnace. You remember, he threw them in that furnace. And you know what? And the only thing that was burned off was the bonds that held them.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's a beautiful analogy. When we go into that furnace, the only thing that's removed by that hardship and that adversity is our inhibitions, is the cords that were binding us. We became more free. We become more free. We
Mm-hmm.
become better. We become stronger. All those things happen through adversity.
Yeah. Alan, I couldn't agree more. And that's very well put. It is important, and we do have to go through these challenges, and that's what life is all about. Life is nothing but a challenge.
No, that's very true. And how we approach those challenges, how we prepare for them, those are all important for our kids to see. I remember Part of this conversation kind of goes into preparation and hard work. Now that we're talking about it, Mike, I remember in one of the letters I was was with my eldest daughter at the time, and we woke up on New Year's Day into a new year, and we said, "Hey, let's start this new year right. Let's go to the gym early." So we got in the car, went off to the gym, and we got to the gym early to work out together. And I think it
Mm-hmm.
was probably 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Day. And what we saw leaving, coming out, was a guy, a beautiful looking guy, fit, excited for the day. He had already worked out. He had his bag with him, and he climbed into his Rolls Royce and he drove away.
Mm-hmm.
And now, what the interesting lesson for that was is that hard work. That man was prepared. He was a hard worker. He was on top of his game. He was focused. He was intentional. He was doing a lot of things that no one else would do to
Mm-hmm.
get him to where he wanted to go. And so that's the lesson from that. And that's part of how we prepare our kids when we see things like that, to point
Mm-hmm.
out the values of that hard work. Now, I'm not here pumping Rolls Royces or talking about material things, but I'm just saying that, there's a lot of good things that come from determination,
Yeah.
hard work, inspiration, motivation, a
Yeah.
strive towards your goals, right? Those are all
Yeah.
important things for our kids to see.
Yeah. And I did see in the chapter that you wrote about adversity as well.
Yeah, and that's hand in hand for exactly what we're talking about, Mike,
Mm-hmm.
the importance of adversity. And, we saw that firsthand in our youngest daughter's life. She plays a sport that's called squash, and
Oh,
it's a lot
okay.
like racquetball. It's an indoor racket sport. It's very hard. And she toiled years and years, and I watched her suffer defeat after defeat and hardship and pain and injury and and I mean the list goes on and on. But she made it to the top. She was ranked number 10 in the country in
Mm-hmm.
her sport, and now
Wow.
she plays for the University of Pennsylvania in
Okay.
Philadelphia. So she plays in college now through her effort. But she never would have gotten there, Mike, if she didn't go through that fire
Mm-hmm.
repeatedly. And that perseverance through that adversity and that furnace
Mm-hmm.
got her exactly where she wanted to be.
Yeah. And you're right. And I'm very happy. And I know you got to be very proud of her.
Sure, that's our job as dads, right? Proud of our kids.
Yeah. And I see that also part of your book you wrote about believing in yourself. And I know that's had to play a part with her.
Yeah, it is. I mean, look, another letter I wrote about was I'll tell you this story quickly. And it's not only belief in yourself, but it's belief in the process, right?
Mm.
Because sometimes we can lose faith in ourselves, but if we just stick to our disciplines
Mm-hmm.
and trust in our process, you're going to have good outcomes. I live in Chicago, as you know, Mike, and Lake Michigan is a huge body of water. It's
Mm-hmm.
just giant. It's the largest piece of fresh water in the country. And I was bringing a racing sailboat across from the Michigan side to the Chicago side in the early part of spring. So it was the first week of May. And at that time here in Chicago, temperatures are typically in the 40s. And I could tell you that the water temperature was just about 34 degrees in the middle of the lake.
Yeah.
And we were coming through a very big storm. We had 12-foot waves, terrible wind and rain, plummeting temperatures, and it was just dark and rather frightening. But we had
Mm-hmm.
a very good boat. We had very good electronics. We had a navigation system that was relentlessly heading us in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
We were an experienced crew. We were focused. We were determined to get where we were going. And of course, we got exactly to where we're going. So the lesson for me is, to your point, despite being buffeted by the waves, or for our kids, despite being knocked around by life, or being knocked around by circumstances, or
Mm-hmm.
by their peers, or all that stuff is just noise if they focus on where they're going. So if they just keep that focus, and if they're helped by their faith and by their parents to do that, they're going to get to where they want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, Alan, would you have done anything differently when you were raising your kids or writing these letters?
Well, I think every father would be lying if he said that he wouldn't have done anything differently, right, Mike? We all have, yes. Some of us, like me, have searing regrets, and for me, a regret in terms of that is just the amount of time I spent with my kids. Dads have so many responsibilities and so many demands on their time that sometimes we can justify time away from our kids by just meeting our responsibilities. And for me,
Mm-hmm.
it was work. Sometimes I justify time away from my kids, or not being as engaged as I should have, by saying, well, I've got to be a provider. I've got to make enough money to pay the bills, and to give them what they need. And that's just justification. That's nothing more than that. So if I do anything differently as a father, it would be to spend more time with them. In terms of the book, I probably would have started earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I would just, I'd love to challenge your listeners, Mike, to start their own letter writing program with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be anything studied. You don't have to be an English major. And I'd encourage fathers to plagiarize the letters I wrote, and build them for their own life and family. But
Mm-hmm.
not only is it impactful for kids in the moment, Mike, but I think more importantly, it creates a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
You and I, Mike, aren't getting any younger.
I don't
And
know about that.
well, I don't know about you, but our time on earth is short.
Yeah.
And, my kids will never not have this book.
Mm-hmm.
It'll always be there. And it's my legacy and my love to them on paper. And that is something that can be never taken away. And they're going to have it for their children as well,
Yes. Yeah.
and their children's children. And
Mm-hmm.
if they ever want to tell their great grandchildren about me, they could open this book and share the timeless wisdom from it. Because none of this is from me, it's all from God's word, as you
Mm-hmm.
saw.
Mm-hmm.
And what a great legacy that we can provide for our children. So, back to what I was saying, I think it'd be great if every father out there would do this,
Yeah.
because it's a great way to engage with their kids.
I would agree with you, and then I know once I read the some of the book, and you contacted me about letters from a father, and it was like, wow, that would have been a good idea. Uh, but I didn't. But hopefully, men going forward will do that. And I've talked to fathers about writing journals, and once again, as you mentioned, it's about leaving your legacy, something that they can take with them once you're gone. Because you're right, and hopefully we leave before they do, and we can really leave something behind that they can cherish and they can hold on to and say, this was from my dad.
Hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
Alan,
Yeah.
what one lesson did your father teach you?
Mm. My father was a corporate guy. He worked for General Electric and traveled around the world relentlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent less time with him than I liked. But I'll tell you what he taught me. When he retired, he went back to school, Mike, and he got his master's in fine arts and became a very accomplished oil painter. So much so that his artwork has been exhibited and he's been widely recognized. God rest him, he's gone now. But for me, that lesson was that we get second chances.
Mm-hmm.
We can do what we love, and it's never too late. So, Mike, I'm going to challenge you. You said you missed your opportunity with letters. No, you didn't. You can always start, and a father is never too past his prime. Your kids are in a different space, or you may have grandchildren. I think my
Mm-hmm.
next book is going to be letters from a grandfather with all the perspective that I might have in my older years
Yeah.
to them. So I think, good question, Mike. I think,
Yeah.
we always get second chances, and it's never too late with the lessons I heard from my father.
And I think you're right because I do. I have three grandkids, and I don't get to see them nowhere near as much as I would like to because we live in different states. And then, you had the pandemic and all that. But um, I would like to pass on some of this information that I've learned as an older man to my kids and my grandkids. So, I might have to look into that a little closer.
I think
Yeah.
you should, man. What a gift to them when they hit. Maybe you give it to them when they're 21 and you give them a stack of letters in a book that tells them about you and your life and your experiences and your values.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
not too
Yeah.
late, Mike.
Oh, all right. Now, what is one thing that you hope you have instilled into your kids?
Faith, more than anything. I think every Christian dad wants to make sure that his kids have that relationship with Christ
Mm-hmm.
that is everything in this life. I mean, you know that nothing compares to that relationship with God. It's all dust and ashes. So I would want them to have faith, and that's the most important thing I can think.
Good. Good. Well, Alan, I want to thank you for coming on the show and presenting letters from a father. I really hope that a lot of men take away some of the things that you mentioned because you have really made some excellent points on how you can stay in touch with your kids, leave a legacy with your kids. Know, that you got to show them love, you got to be there, and you got to show up. And you have done, and you mentioned it. You said that you used to work a lot and you didn't spend as much time as you wanted to. Now I'm going to ask you something before I go. Do you think that was something that you kind of learned from your dad and you took that on until you learned better?
I'm not so sure about that, Mike. I've always been a striver. I've
Okay.
always been someone who's been pursues goals relentlessly. I
Mm-hmm.
get something in my head and I drive towards it.
Okay.
Sometimes the detriment of other parts of my life, and of course that lens of experience that you and I both have maybe casts a different shadow on things now. But that's
Mm-hmm.
probably where it came from. Is just that striving type A personality that I bring.
Okay. Yeah. Well, good. Well, I'm glad that you have been able to start spending the time with your kids and showing them really what a father with faith and a child of God is like, and being such a good example for them. And I know, I don't know your kids, but I know that they're going to take this with them through the rest of their life, and all the lessons you've learned and taught them is going to play a part in their life.
Oh, Mike, God willing, and I appreciate your kind words today. And I'm just so thankful for the work you're doing with your show and your support of dads and families. Again, I believe that there's no greater calling and there's no greater way for you to shape the next generation. So thank you for what you're doing.
No, no. Well, I would tell anybody it wasn't my idea. So it was something that I never thought I would be doing, but I'm so grateful that I've been asked to do it and blessed to do it. I love meeting people like yourself and getting to know people like you. So I'm really very happy and very blessed to be able to do what I've been asked to do.
Mm, thanks, Mike, for it. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, Alan, thank you once again, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. And when you write that book for the letters for grandkids, yeah, you got to let me know so you can come back on the show.
I need some grandkids first, Mike.
I
So
know you do. I know it. I got the ages, and they're not there yet. But when you do get them, you got to let me know and come on back on the show. Okay?
Roger that. Thank you.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this Father Show today, and us speaking with Alan Carter about letters from a father. You have, if you don't have the book, which I know you don't, you got to go out and get it. You, as a man, and really even as a mother, go out and get the book, learn. You can learn something because even though it's a letter from a father, who say a mother can't write their letters? And I know we got women viewers out there, so we can all send letters to our kids and teach our kids, because one thing that I truly believe is a child need both parents in their life, actively in their lives. And by writing a letter, is great. You can keep in touch with your kids and they can always have a piece of you and letters and learning from you. So if you have not subscribed to our show, please go to the Father Show with Mike Thompson YouTube channel and hit that subscription button. And while you're there, hit the like button. And you can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn. The show is broadcast on Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and other apps. So you can find it, and also tell somebody else that we are here. Tell them so they can listen to what Alan had to say about letters from my father, and that they can learn from that. And also for those men out there that are looking for resources, please go to the Father Show with MikeThompson.com, click on resources, and there you will find national and statewide resources that can assist you in whatever that you may need. And if you can't find it, hit me up on the Father Show at gmail.com and I will see what I can do. But I want to thank Alan Carter for coming on the show and presenting letters from a father. And I hope you learned something from it, and I hope you got something out of it, and you take up the practice yourself. So until I see you next week, God bless you all. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.